interpretation from Spanish. So, Ameya, will you be able to do that? Yeah, thank you. So, I guess we'll get started. Thank you, Lauren. So, now the stage is yours. You can introduce the panelists and start the session. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Can you hear me? All good? Okay. Welcome, everyone, to this panel on multilingual media. I'm Lauren. I'm the director of the Lingua Project at Global Voices, which is the project that unites a whole bunch of wonderful folks who make sure that Global Voices stories are translated into dozens and dozens of languages. I'm joined here by some also incredible folks who are going to help us pull a little bit on what it means to make media in multiple languages. Let me briefly introduce you to them all. We have Dev Kumar No worries, we're struggling with the microphone, so we haven't gotten very far. Let's try this again. Let's introduce the wonderful people on this panel. We have Dev Kumar Sunawar, who is the founding chairperson of Indigenous Television here in Nepal, which is the first multilingual Indigenous community television station, not only in Nepal, but in the region. Multimedia journalist, who is a staff writer on the Indigenous news desk at environmental news site Mongabay. We have our very own Philip Nubel, who is the managing editor of Global Voices and quite the polyglot himself. We have Sacio Sanchez, who is an editor and Maya language advocate from Yucatan, Mexico, where she runs the Maya language section of a newspaper called La Jornada Maya. Sasi with some interpretation support is Isela Shospa, an independent illustrator, designer, and publisher from Mexico City, whose award-winning books center indigenous cultures. So before we start the discussion, I just want to turn to everyone out there in the audience for a second and ask a pair of questions. Raise your hand if you speak more than one language. That's a pretty decent showing. Okay, hands down. Raise your hand if you read stories, consume media, or journalism in more than one language. That is a very decent showing of hands. So clearly there is a market for news and media in multiple languages, but putting aside any dry economic soulless arguments on that, I'd like to start a discussion by posing a short challenge to our panel here. If you had to summarize in one sentence, and one sentence only, no cheating, why is it important to produce media in more than one language? Why is it? Why is it important? Go for it.
To ensure inclusivity.
To ensure inclusivity. I like it.
Because our audiences are also multilingual.
Sounds right.
Because we are walking in this world.
Nice.
Porque todos estamos en este mundo.
Perfect.
So in a multilingual society, monolingual or dual-lingual media content is incomplete, ignoring to the large portion of the communities. So there is a necessary.
Thank you. One sentence, multi-clause, but one sentence. So clearly we're talking about important stuff, multilingual media.
Nepal, obviously Nepal is multilingual, multicultural, multi-ethnic, very colorful rainbow nation. There are 124 languages spoken by 142 different ethnic and caste groups, and out of which 59 are recognized as indigenous peoples. if you look to the statistics of media in Nepal, about 12,200 plus televisions have already obtained a license, more than 1,000 radios, and there are about 7,000 newspapers, plus around 3,000 to 4,000 online platforms. But these medias actually, the medium of content are mainly Nepali or English. So there was a need that there were, as I said earlier, multiple languages which are spoken in Nepal, but are not getting a platform into our media. So what we thought back in 2011, a group of us working into a different ministry media came together, and we thought, and we founded Indigenous Media Foundations. And first, we started producing radio programs into different indigenous languages, but then we thought we needed a radio first. So we set up radio in rural area where there is not electricity or road. So we started producing radio programs into different languages, but the radio was reaching only in certain area. So we thought, now that is not working. So we thought, why not we start a TV so that can reach across Nepal. So in 2016, we founded a TV. The need was, as I said earlier, the media in Nepal, whatever newspaper, whatever forms, are owned, controlled by socially and economically powerful groups and influenced by the political parties. But that is not serving to the communities in the grassroots. So we thought there is a need. So we actually, the group, when we started TV, we were still a student studying in the master's degree in the colleges. We thought we have to start it. So we did it. We didn't have resources, but we started with. So we formed a team from different indigenous communities, and then we said that we start from ourselves. So first, initially, we started producing TV programs into 8 different languages. But later on, as you said, when you start a platform, later on you get the friends. Earlier, you don't have any resources or you don't have any friends, but then you start getting friends. Now I have colleagues here, Niseis, Rosina, and all the other colleagues are also here. So they joined in the team, and each of us actually work together. We don't get funding from the government itself, but we actually got the friends from outside, even from the community. So we actually partner with the communities, that these indigenous groups, they don't have access to the media, they don't have a voice, they don't have a participation, so that we come together, we use that platform, and today, as you rightly said, that indigenous television today is only a media platform that produces TV programs close to 24 indigenous languages plus Nepali, English. And we have a cable, we have a satellite, and then we also have IPTV, internet-based televisions, and reaching across the globe. So we actually are only the official media partner of the UN. When UN actually declared International Year of Indigenous Languages in 2019, and now UN has declared the International Decade of Indigenous Languages from 2022 to 2032. Indigenous television is again official media partner covering the indigenous languages issues from Asia. So one of the strengths that what we do is, being only indigenous run television, each and every indigenous-led organizations actually we partner with. So these TV programs are produced by the indigenous peoples themselves. So if you look into indigenous television, we hardly find colleagues who have gone to journalism schools. We actually have trained them how to face a camera, how to ask questions, how to write a script. So by giving this a smaller training, they actually are a star of the indigenous television program producers today. So today, next year, we will be celebrating 10th years of the indigenous television. So we actually have been able to write a history. So that is how we have so far. That is our journey, right? To cut our long story to short. Thank you.
Thank you for explaining that. That's pretty impressive. If you want to applaud, please go for it. Sasi, turning to you. You also work with an indigenous language, Maya, but unlike Dev over there, who has just told us about television, you work with print as a format, with text as a format, as in a newspaper. Though I know you've worked with radio in the past, so you also have that experience to compare and contrast. So how does working with text compared to other visual or oral formats? And talking specifically about multilingual media in indigenous languages, what role or importance do text-based stories have?
Thank you. I feel more comfortable in Spanish, so I'm gonna change. Creo que en México existen 69 lenguas nacionales o indígenas y dentro de esas está el español.
Mexico has 69 indigenous languages, official indigenous languages, and among them is Spanish.
Sin embargo, nos han hecho creer que el español es la lengua oficial, pese a que en México no existen lenguas oficiales.
But officially we believe that the only official language is Spanish and we don't really know about the other languages.
Y eso conlleva muchísimas cosas, tiene muchísimo peso lingüístico, político y social para los hablantes de lenguas nacionales como nosotras.
That puts a lot of weight on political and political weight and cultural weight into the people who speak these languages.
Prácticamente en este punto nosotros tenemos que argumentar por qué necesitamos estar publicando, escribiendo o ser presentes en los medios tanto periodísticos como digitales.
So to this point, all the native speakers have to explain to the nation why they need and why they have the right to have their voices and their languages on media.
Entonces, bajo esa lógica, el estar publicando en una lengua nacional o indígena es un acto no solamente revolucionario, sino también político y, por supuesto, que lleva a la revitalización.
Under that logic, to be speaking and writing in one of these official national languages from Mexico has become a political and activist way to express from indigenous communities.
Creo que es necesario que cambiemos no solamente la visual en las ciudades y en los pueblos, sino también en los medios digitales, hablando de la escritura en lenguas nacionales.
She's talking about the visuals and how important it is to see the writing systems of these indigenous languages on official newspaper and media.
Existe también una parte muy compleja en cuanto a lo que llamamos el círculo vicioso, de que siempre los comentarios es que quién va a leer eso, porque no hay hablantes que hayan sido alfabetizados en la lengua.
They always usually receive comments about how come they're making this media in these languages that nobody knows how to read.
Pero luego está el otro lado que dicen que si no existieran esos materiales, entonces ¿cómo iniciaríamos ese proceso de alfabetización?
But then there's another opinion that says, if we don't have these materials, how are we going to start to read in these languages?
Entonces creo que tiene mucha carga en cuanto a las acciones que conlleva escribir en una lengua indígena o nacional, no solamente para documentar incluso lo que sucede en la actualidad, sino también como una acción que lleva consigo esta idea de poder alfabetizar en nuestra propia lengua.
So she said that is quite strong to do this, to write in these indigenous languages, because then they can start a process of documenting the language and also to standardize and have more grammar rules what's the word for alfabetizar? To increase literacy on these languages.
Además de que hacer presente la lengua y revitalizar no solo corresponde a los hablantes, sino a toda la sociedad.
And she also believes that this job of revitalization of languages is not only the community's responsibility, it's also the whole nation's responsibility.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. Turning to Sanam, let me ask you. So when we talk about multilingual media in a linguistically diverse place, we're not just talking about the language of the output, the language of the story or the video package. We can also be talking about the reporting and writing process itself. You know, a journalist may have their mother tongue, and then they conduct their reporting in a second language to be able to connect with the people they're speaking with. and the people they're speaking with might be speaking in their second language as well to be able to converse with the journalist. And then if a journalist is seeking publication in an international outlet, they might write or produce their video package in a third language, one of the world's dominant languages. Working across all of these languages like this, it can open up worlds and allow individual people and peoples separated by oceans to connect and see what struggles they have in common. But things can get lost in translation if we're not careful. Individual people or entire peoples can be misinterpreted or flattened in a very unjust way. Could you tell us a bit about your experience navigating multilingualism in this sense in your career as a journalist and how you balance all that?
Thank you for the question, Lauren. I am personally speaking for, I belong to Hyolmo community, which is one of the indigenous communities from the northeastern part of Nepal, that is the Himalayas of Nepal. So I speak one language, that's my mother tongue, and I work in Nepali and English, and with Mongabay, I am now working with people from across the globe. So we have more than 100 journalists who work in multilingual languages, and it's really a very beautiful experience to work with diverse group of journalists, and at the same time it's really challenging as well because you are from one part of the world and you're working with other community, and it's really very important to listen, to be a very great listener. And also in terms of that, I am very lucky to have a lot of colleagues who hail from, who belong from different communities, from Spain or Latin America, Africa, and a lot of Southeast Asia as well. So in that sense, it's really a very community, a very diverse community who you can learn and really, you know, how to learn in a very multilingual and kind of diverse community. It's a very good lesson for me as a journalist from Nepal, indigenous, belonging to indigenous community. And in terms of how I deal with my daily reporting, how I deal with these challenges is I really love to listen to my sources a lot who belong from, for example, different community, from the indigenous community in Myanmar or Africa or any part of the world. So yeah, as you rightly put, it's a lot of things get lost in translation while you write specifically on indigenous issues. So in that sense, I think it's very much important to be a good listener as well as you know, like, there are a lot of things that get lost in translation, so it's very important for you to hold that sense of the word that is really important in that local language and just not translate in English. For example, you just keep that word intact, not to kill the sense of that language. So I basically love doing that in my writings or in my content that I produce. So it's really a very familiar environment that we get with these practices that, you know, specifically with indigenous coverages, we love, you know, welcoming indigenous ideas and the keywords that they are really familiar with. I think that is the way to go with kind of welcoming inclusivity in written forms, and also getting to know how their language system or their, you know, how this, the understanding of how they look into whatever kind of journalism we do in a very different way. So yeah, I think personally this has really helped me a lot to be a very good listener and to seek help from colleagues who come from different diverse background, and also include keywords that are really familiar with indigenous communities, very specific communities coming from different backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned listening and being a really good listener. For many years, Global Voices' catchphrase was, "The world is talking, are you listening?" Turning to Global Voices and you, Philip, we're a pretty multilingual place. We produce stories in different languages, and we have those stories translated into even more languages. And then we have some special projects like the Global Climate Justice Fellowship, which paired Chinese speakers with folks in the global majority who spoke several different languages, which necessitates working across multiple languages in the process of collaboration and reporting. The point being, there's a mix of a lot of things here. There's multilingual original story production, and there's multilingual translation. To be provocative for a second, wouldn't our lives be easier if we just did one and not both? Wouldn't we still be multilingual? Why do both?
Thank you for the question. If I may, I will actually start with a little story to bounce back on what you were saying. So people who know me know that the question I hate the most is, where do you come from? Because the question supposes that you can only come from one place. I come from many places, and my father is French, from southern France. But my father's parents, so my grandparents' first language was not French. It's a language called Occitan, which is very close to Catalan. It's a late Latin language that was completely erased by the central French government for about 100 years. So if you look at about 100 years ago, in southern France, 90% of the people would speak this language, Occitan. Today, it's 2%. But for me, my relationship to this language that I do not speak is just a few words, like Kezako, which means, what is this? But I remember that in my memory, Occitan was the language that my grandparents spoke, as in many families, when they didn't want other people to understand, which I think is very common. But about a year ago, since I am part of the Global Voices community, I discovered that in Toulouse, in southern France, there is a television that broadcasts in Occitan. And I remember my emotional shock when I just switched on the internet and listened for a TV show talking about news and culture in a language that to me was associated to my grandparents, to sometimes what we call, not in a bad sense, kitchen language. You know, the language that maybe your grandmother speaks, but you never think that this language can be a relay for things like news or entertainment. And I think it's extremely powerful, whether it's TV or radio. People who have this distant relationship or this language was not valued, suddenly you redress what I call this power relation between languages, because you can learn things in Occitan and not necessarily in French. So I think it's extremely important. And of course, it's the same for radio, it's the same for print. It changes the whole narrative. So this is a long way to answer your great question, Lauren. I think that when I also try to explain what is Global Voices about, which usually requires 2 hours, because we do so many things in so many languages, I always tell people, you know, maybe you will remember only 1% of what I said that Global Voices does. I want you to remember one word: context. And to me, we cannot separate context from language. And so for those of you who are not so familiar with Global Voices stories, in most cases, not always, you will see that when we do a story, we print it in any language. It doesn't have to be in English, because we interview people or because we take social media content, we always have the original quote in the original language. So let's say I'm writing a story in English about Nepal, and I'm interviewing someone who speaks Nepali, or who speaks Tamang, or who speaks Limbu. The quote, whether it's from social media or a personal interview, will be in those languages. And that's why I understand, you know, GV is celebrating 20 years. I've been in this position for 5 years. I cannot imagine Global Voices speaking just one or even just 2 languages. It's just impossible. So the bad news is that we're not going to simplify anything in the newsroom, which I think is, of course, very good news. And together with Lingua, we want to actually expand the non-English language writing, editing, publishing, social media work. Because precisely language is context. And so if Global Voices is about context, we cannot just operate in a monolingual or very few language context. Thank you.
Thank you for that battle cry at the end. I like it. So clearly, from what we've heard here, multilingualism in media is very important, but we can't ignore the fact that it makes things more complex. Working with more than one language, it's just harder. It's worth it, but it's harder. So I would love to ask everyone on the panel here, since you all have had many years of experience working across languages in media production, what is the biggest lesson you've learned in your experience when it comes to multilingual media? If anyone is moved to go first, please take the mic.
Thank you, Lauren. I want to correct your statement as you said. Many feel that when in the country where there is multiple languages, multilingual, diverse languages there, it's really difficult to work with. So government actually has same sentiment, same statement. In Nepal, there are multiple languages, and introducing these languages into education and media, it's really difficult. It's really hard. That sentiment actually doesn't work. So what I think government even should recorrect this. So what I believe is the language, let's say Nepal has 124 languages, which is what I believe is one of the invaluable, intangible heritages of the country, which is invaluable heritages of the country, that government actually should feel pride and should at least encourage to use maybe in different mediums, in the education, in the media, or in the judiciary. Lately, if you just look into the international forum, the government of Nepal is so to the front that agreeing or giving commitments internationally that, okay, Nepal is a multilingual country, we are ready to introduce multi-languages in different platforms. So if you look into, let's say, we have a long history, and these linguistic communities are fighting to get their languages being reflected in different forums, as I said earlier. So so far, the government has, what I think is government has not made any effort in introducing this, diverse languages into different forums. Obviously, the government has that obligation too. So what I think, if you just open your heart and welcome to the community, and it is not the government staying far, government should feel that it is really difficult. So as my own experience is that when we started indigenous television back in 2016, or when we started radio back in 2013, I am from a Sunwar indigenous community. I speak only one language, let's say Nepali or Sunwar or English, third language is only. But there are 124 different languages. If I felt that there is difficult, so that is not possible. So we open up arms, we open up platforms. Now we produce TV programs into 24 different languages, and many more are coming up. So I think if government thinks indifferently, it is really easy. Therefore, government felt that it is really difficult, so that it is not using, these different languages. So, language preservation, promotion, revitalization, so far actually has only remained to the communities. So whatever the initiative that has taken so far is the community-led initiative only. Government has not made any investment in the reservation or preservation of the languages in Nepal, just because of that statement. So I think government as well as international communities look differently. It is really easy if they create a platform. Government has to do only one or a couple of things only. If government is ready to devise the policies or the laws and open up the doors, I think the communities will come there to flourish their languages themselves. So it's not that much easy. It's easy. It's easy to start with. So government as well as the policymakers should be very open, and they should feel responsible as well, so that the other languages also can flourish. That is how we could do it. And the government is the big entity that is possible to do it.
Thank you for correcting me in my prompt. Does anyone else feel moved to answer?
Quisiera comentar que el año entrante serán 10 años de estar colaborando en el periódico.
She wants to comment that next year she's going to be 10 years working at a newspaper.
Y han sido me parece, muchísimos desafíos, no solamente a nivel personal, sino en lo que implica editar y publicar un periódico de lunes a viernes por 10 años.
And she faced a lot of difficulties because I don't know if you can imagine what it means to publish, edit, and correct and review a newspaper for 10 years.
De entrada, porque muchos al principio o en los primeros años cuestionaban que por qué en maya, que es mi idioma materno, y no en inglés, tenía que publicarse esa página.
Especially because at the very beginning she was questioned about why she has to do it in Mayan language and not in English, for example.
Y por fortuna el equipo ha defendido o hemos defendido muy bien el proyecto, que ya estamos en ese tiempo publicando.
Luckily, her team stand up and they defend this project, and it's been all this time like they have been doing this for this long time because of that.
Y como anécdota, creo que también es una cuestión de mucha práctica, creo que quienes estamos dedicados a eso lo sabemos. En algún momento se le preguntó a otras personas que cuánto tiempo llevaría publicar una plana o la sección, y decía que en una semana podrían tener el contenido.
As an example, she's saying that this kind of job comes along with practice. And she remembers one time when somebody asked how long it will take to edit one column of the newspaper in this Mayan language, and the person answered, "It's going to take me 1 week."
Entonces, el periódico, pues es como lo que dice el nombre, es diario, y eso implica también un reto a nivel profesional y a nivel personal.
But as we know, the newspapers have to publish columns every day, so that was a very big step for her, and she managed to do it.
Además de lo que implica editar en lengua maya,
Also the complications of copy editing an indigenous language.
que no es lo mismo que publicar en español, pese a que utilizamos esas mismas grafías.
And she wants to remark that it's not the same as copy editing Spanish, even if they use the same characters.
Por ejemplo, nuestro idioma es polisémico, es decir, una misma palabra puede significar varias cosas dependiendo del contexto.
It's polysémico. Although her language is controversial because some words could have many meanings.
Entonces, una de las reglas que a mí me marcaba muchísimo desde el español era que no podía repetir palabras.
So one of her rules as copy editor was like she couldn't repeat the same word.
Entonces yo tenía una batalla diario con los editores de español para explicar que en mi lengua así es el idioma.
So she had to fight a battle with the copy editors in Spanish, trying to explain why she had to do that, because in her language that was the right way to do it.
O por qué de pronto una nota era más larga en maya que en español o viceversa.
Or why one column in Mayan language was longer in characters than the column in Spanish.
Entonces, básicamente son muchos retos en cuanto a la edición, en cuanto también a lo impreso, porque al final lo que uno ve es una cosa, y luego venía la parte de subirlo a la web.
So she faced a lot of challenges, not only the copy editing challenges, also the printing challenges, and the other process of putting the information online.
Porque, por ejemplo, nosotros usamos los apóstrofos, que es esta comita que viene después de las palabras para remarcar algunas como cac.
They use the apostrophes to mark sounds, some special sounds under language. So I'm going to add this. That's a very difficult thing for designers because they have to find special characters.
Bueno, a eso iba justamente. Y era algo que me remarcaba mucho al momento de subirlo a la web, porque eso representaba un reto para quienes estaban trabajando en esa área.
So apparently the head editor was very mad because that was very difficult for designers to. They were not used to use those characters, so that made more difficult the work.
Y eso es nada más en la parte de edición. Ya ni les cuento la parte de distribución.
And she's not gonna talk about how distribution was because that's another long history.
Dios botic. Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sanam, do you want to take the mic?
I just want to add what Cecil said. It's really beautiful that she got to work with her language, and that's like scripted well, and yeah, that's a very beautiful experience. But in terms of Nepal, like as they've also rightly put, we have 124 languages, and most of them are oral languages, including mine. And so it sometimes get a bit challenging because it's not really scripted and we don't really have scripts. But at the same time, the folklore songs or the songs that have been passed down from generation to generation, I think that is a very important tool, powerful tool to really preserve that language that we have been through songs and cultures that we have been singing for generations. And I recently also had this reporting experience in one of the endangered communities in Nepal. So it was the story surrounded in Bankaria community, which is one of the, and their language is one of the languages that is on the verge of extinction. So it's like completely, not completely, but it's really rapidly, we're losing that language. And so at that time, the moment was really, I really reflect on that moment, because when I asked for the people, the elders to sing their songs, they couldn't really do that because most of the elders, they were already passed away, and the few of them, they were like, they have a bit like forgotten, they were in a forgotten state. And when I asked the children, they were not really able to speak a word, and it was at the time I really realized that it's really important to link all the situations with curriculum, school curriculum. And when I just found out that they're not really taught in their languages in their school, in their classrooms, it also really, we also lose this very important sense and very important powerful tool of, the language that we say, the language that we talk about, the discourses that we hold on languages. I think that is the moment, it really made me think that local media in this sense is really important. And we also need to have this kind of revitalization models coming up to revitalize such languages which are on the verge of extinction, including this Bankaria language. So in terms of that, it was like kind of, they were having kind of identity crisis, just to say, not to make it like sound really serious, but that one language, Bankaria language, and other languages, many languages which are oral in Nepal, are also on the verge of extinction. And yes, they've rightly said government support is really required. But other than that, I think it is really also important with communities to come together, because language is not only a tool to communicate, it's also a means to empower communities to, kind of say that we are in this together. I don't know, that is a tangible way of how we really identify ourselves. So I think that was the experience I would love to share here right now.
Thank you. Philip, biggest lesson learned?
A million. I think that the one I want to focus on is that when people look at Global Voices, and we have roughly 30 languages where we translate the stories, not at the same volume, not at the same path, but people who don't understand translation and multi-language media think, okay, so someone writes a story in one language and someone else translates it, maybe there is some editing and it's done. That's just the beginning. The main thing that I have really learned through Global Voices is that besides the linguistic translation, there is also a cultural translation. And here I'm referring more to the form and the style of news. So because I edit in several languages, I see that there is a difference, for example, within the structure. And what is very acceptable in one language is not so acceptable in another one. So very simple things such as, so-called, and I hate this word, oh, your language is too emotional. It doesn't sound like journalism. That wouldn't work, let's say, in English, typically. Or you should follow the BBC model, just facts, very dry. Or should the main idea be at the beginning, or should you naturally come out in the conclusion that this is the main idea? There are also very interesting cultural modes of covering news. Some of you might be familiar with what is called gonzo journalism in Latin America. There is also a very good school of journalism in Central Europe, and specifically in Poland, which uses a French word, reportage, but it's a sort of mixture of so-called mainstream journalism and also very literary forms. So you describe the people, you describe the colors, the situation, and if you're not familiar, you might think that it almost reads or sounds like fiction. It's a sort of alliance of fiction and non-fiction. And I think that whether it's at Global Voices or in other settings, I want to say that it's not a case of lost in translation, but it's actually the opposite. It's what we win in translation. Because by having conversation within the newsrooms, with editors, with translators, we understand that, no, the BBC, in a very colonial way, is not the only model that we should look at. There are so many other models of reporting the news that are great and that we can learn from them. So that has been my biggest learning.
Thank you, Philip. With that, I want to turn to everyone here in the room in case there are questions you would like to ask of our incredible panel here. I see a hand in the back.
Hi, my name is Bali. I have the two questions. In Taiwan, there are the indigenous television station and foundation that have the implement many language projects, but most of this information belong to the government rather than the community. So I want to ask what would you suggest that we do as the community to take this back in our own hands? And another question is, and I would also love to know whether there's a chance we can collaborate, I don't know how to say, with the GV on this front. Thank you.
Thank you, brother, for your questions. I'm really impressed. When we started TV in Nepal, we also looked into similar kind of projects in other part of the globe. We found there is Taiwan Indigenous Television as well, run by the government, funded by the government. And just like that, there are also other televisions which are funded by the government. But in that terms, the indigenous television in Nepal are owned by, operated by indigenous communities ourselves. So this is one of the only community television in Nepal. But what you can do, or what we can do from community side, while I traveled into different countries, my experience basically is that I have seen many communities have undertaken their own initiative to start up small initiatives, either by producing documentaries or radio programs or podcasts or video documentaries and so forth. That really encourages us. So my suggestion to you is also keep advocating to the government that the television or producing a program or having access to that, even Taiwan television, perhaps if you advocate for that one, maybe Taiwan indigenous television also can open up the door that can accommodate communities, or that can be a part of initiative of the communities itself. But this is a long struggle that you have to undertake. But there are freely available social medias, even if the government has its own mainstream called television, but you can use the YouTube and other social media platform. So you also have certain skills, and in Nepal, what we called, someone basically said that, united we stand, divided we fall. So unite together. So together we can make a difference. So if you want to start any kind of initiative in Taiwan, perhaps in Nepal, as a community initiative that we have undertaken, we are here. We can find out the ways that we can train you, even from there, that you can undertake that initiative as well. So even to start a community radios or television or any sort of initiative that we can be a part of your initiative, we will be happy to share our skills and knowledges as well. Thank you. I think that answers.
very quickly on how we can collaborate together with Global Voices. I think you raise a very important question about ownership of the language. Who owns the content even of the news? Is it the government? Is it the community? Is it the church? Is it the activists? Is it the linguists? Is it the journalists? This is a question for all languages. There are very quickly very simple things that we can do. We would be happy to interview members of your community, regardless of their status. Part of Global Voices is also called Rising Voices, where my colleague Eddie does a lot of things with his team. And for example, we offer, I mean, I'm going to laugh now because a Twitter account, but we don't necessarily love like Twitter today. It could be a Blue Sky account where basically we give ownership of a social media account to speakers or activists or members of the community of the language. And you can present your own situation in your own words, and it will be also translated. And we also can do what we're doing right now is panels in person or online. So there are many ways we can collaborate, and please talk to us. And I'm based in Taiwan, so we can do a lot of things. Thank you.
Algo muy rápido. Solamente comentar que si es un canal del gobierno, desconozco el marco legal que exista en el país, pero creo que una herramienta clave es el marco legal.
I'm not sure if I hear that channel that you have is owned by the government. It is or not? I misunderstood. It is, okay. So she's saying that there's this legal frame that might be protecting, might be, like maybe the solution is in that frame of legal rights that you have.
Y no sé si mi respuesta es demasiado revolucionaria, pero un pueblo que no conoce sus leyes no puede exigir. Entonces es necesario conocer de qué marco legal parte el país para entonces a partir de eso exigir como pueblo lo que le pertenece.
She doesn't know if this is very revolutionary, too revolutionary, but she is saying that a community needs to know the law, needs to know how to use that law in order to bring back their rights as indigenous communities. So then there might be a way to get back that channel.
Eso requiere de mucha organización y es sumamente cansado y lleva muchísimo tiempo, pero creo que sería una forma tal vez de tomar lo que al pueblo le pertenece.
That requires time and a lot of effort, but she thinks that might be a good way to get back what belongs to the people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
10 more minutes, gotcha. Is there any other questions out there? I see a hand.
Zubair from Pakistan, a very simple question. So we in South Asia, especially in Bangladesh and Pakistan, and probably in Nepal, face some challenges prompted by the governments to include more than 3 or 2 languages in education. So I wonder how many languages are included in Nepali education and what the challenges they face, I mean, while including all the languages or most of the languages. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. So if you just search into the Google, you will find a kind of statistics that government has introduced curriculum into 24 or 25 different indigenous languages. But from the perspective of advocating that government introduced the indigenous languages not as a translated curriculum, but as a medium to teach into the schools. So recently, government has also undertaken a kind of, let's say, a model schools in some of the indigenous-led settlements, and that has been very successful. If you take example from the Kathmandu Valley itself, the local government, which is Kathmandu Metropolitan City, actually has introduced the Newari language as medium of teaching, as a medium, not as a translated curriculum. That has been very successful, and lately, because of this international pressures and also government's international commitment, government is pressured, and recently the Bagmati, one of the provinces, actually has declared one of the provinces that they will use Newar, Nepali Bhasa, Nepal Bhasa, and Tamang, apart from the Nepali languages as the medium of government businesses as well. So this is just a starting point, but we are still in the process. We are still looking carefully at how government introduces or applicates that even that Tamang and Nepal Bhasa into education, into, let's say, justice delivery, or into a media. But so far, whatever the media content, what have been generated so far is the community initiative. As I said, though there are the government-led, government-run radio, Radio Nepal, or the newspaper, or the television, those are merely translations from Nepali news to the different languages. So what we think is translation is different. Producing news or media content into different indigenous languages is different. Or teaching, let's say, giving education as a translated curriculum is different than introducing the indigenous languages as medium is different. This similar example we find in Asia, as you said, in Bangladesh, in India, and elsewhere, it is similar situation. So communities are actively struggling to get their languages being introduced in the educations, but we are sure that one day we can have, that justice.
Just one last thought, whatever they've said, I think, yeah, just to add upon what he said, I think government efforts are also on the rise. I think it is a positive situation that language, they are working to really revitalize such languages which are on the verge of extinction. But I think it's very important as well for indigenous communities to come up, to stand up for their own language, because yesterday I just attended this session on digital sovereignty, and it was, then I also got to know that Archive Nepal is really working with one of the indigenous endangered languages in Nepal. So they're kind of documenting that they are having this data and digital sovereignty, and they're collaborating, and they are, that is run by indigenous Newar activist. Also, she is a data, I think she works with data. So I think it's really, the point is, it's really very important to stand up for ourselves, because whatever cosmovisions, whatever ideologies we hold, we can give justice, we can rightly put it to our dictionaries or whatever forms we want to express it. So it's also a part of expression. So there are government efforts, they are pressurized to do this on their end, but in terms of what they have been presenting might not really go well with what we want to express as the indigenous people. So I think it's very important for these kind of organizations or small networks to come forth and also kind of express themselves on their own terms. I think that's really important in terms of Nepal as well. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to add anything? All right, I realize we're running short on time, so I am going to ask the panel one last question. Looking toward the future, do you think we are headed toward a more multilingual media tradition? Are you optimistic?
So I think when we look into the future, we always have to be optimistic. What I believe is there is nothing impossible, so everything is possible. Again, I would like to reiterate same sentences earlier as I made, that united, right? United we stand, united we stand, and divided we fall. So if we come together, and if we look for the positive thing, and if we dream, I think that dream will come true.
Yeah, I think there's so much crisis going on around the world. For example, climate emergencies we're having, and we are all into this together. But saying that, I think hope is the only thing that really binds us. So I'm very hopeful that our language will be revitalized, and that we'll have our say on what we want to, what authority we want to gain over our discourses and our languages and the systems that we want to preserve and the traditional values that we want to hold. So I think I'm very optimistic in terms of Nepal, and also in terms of the workspaces that I work with. They are really diverse, and I really hope that it is also be applicable in workstations in Nepal as well.
I think for me, there are two phenomena that, one makes me optimistic. The other one, I have a huge question mark. The first one is migration, because migration, whether it's a choice or not, to go quickly, often leads to diaspora, and diaspora want to have media, they need media. It's also a way for the next generation, precisely as I explained, to pick up the language and see it used in media context. The one where I have a giant question mark is AI.
Yo solamente agregaría que me parece que en ningún pueblo, ninguna lengua está buscando ser más que otra o estar por encima de ella, sino solamente está buscando tener las mismas posibilidades. Entonces creo que en el futuro yo esperaría que todos estemos en ese mismo canal.
She wants to say that she doesn't believe that any language or any community wants to be better than another one. They don't believe that their language is more or less important than any other. And she's very optimistic, and she likes to think that in the future we will reach that point where every language and every community is the same.
Thank you. With that, a round of applause for these wonderful folks. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for all the panelists. Yeah. I have few announcements to make. So the lunch will be served at 2 halls. One is Platinum, another one is Crystal, which both of them are downstairs. And if you want to eat outside, then go for the Crystal Hall, because there's a garden outside as well. So you can eat there. And another important announcement, has anybody left a key somewhere? Has anybody has lost a key? We have found a key from Sankar Hotel, so it is there at the registration desk, so you can collect that from there. And yes, we'll have another session here. So it's about like Wikipedia movement, how it is empowering language reclamation. So it will be here in this room after the lunch. Thank you. Bon appétit.